Welcome to In Conversation with the Safety Collaborators. I am Karen.
And I am Nuala. Whether you're a safety professional, a leader, or an individual committed to making a difference,
We invite you to join the discussion on creating a culture of safety and care, enabling your team and leaders to design a safer and more productive and collaborative world.
welcome to Stories from the Field and our guest, Callum Kerr. Callum is a dedicated health and safety professional committed to safety excellence. He brings a wealth of knowledge and hands-on experience to the field of workplace and industrial safety. With a deep commitment to fostering a culture of safety, he has dedicated his career to equipping individuals and organizations with the skills and knowledge necessary to prevent accidents, minimize risks, and respond effectively in emergency situations. As a safety culture advocate, he believes that safety should be ingrained in an organization's DNA. Callum works tirelessly to foster a culture where everyone values safety as a top priority, contributing to reduced incidents and improved productivity. It is wonderful to have Callum with us today.
Welcome, Callum. It is so delightful to have you with us
Thank you very much.
and to join us for a conversation that matters. So we're looking forward to see what pearls of wisdom might come out of this. No pressure.
None at all.
So you and I met not that long ago, actually. It was earlier this year as you joined a safety leadership program, which was really about leadership and designing culture. And in fact, we did actually use the designer framework for that program. I know that we were really grateful to have you on that program because you participated, you have wisdom, you really brought what we would wish every participant to bring to a program as that to the conversation. And as a result, where our journey continues. So really, really grateful for that. So I guess today we're going to talk a little bit more about maybe that experience, but also before we get into that, what makes you you?
Well, I suppose we'd have to, really, if I looked at my maybe top three values of what would define me, and for me, it would probably be driven to inspire, resiliency, and respect. That's probably my top three that really define me. And if I could take a moment to maybe delve into these three things, that would be great. So really my drive to inspire, I really want to inspire everyone around me by leading by example. And I really want to feed that into the workplace as well. When it comes to health and safety, really leading, showing what the expectation is, showing that I am, simple things like wearing the full PPE all the time is leading by example and showing there. But I suppose on a personal note, for Driven to Inspire, is really inspiring my son to show that anything is possible. My health and safety career, I've only been in health and safety for a couple of years now. I made quite a career change, and I really want to show him that at any point in your life, you can change your environment or change the career or anything you want.
I love that. It is just, I think, one of the greatest gifts that you can give to a child.
Absolutely. Any lessons you can hand on, I think that's really a great gift as well. But if I move on to the resiliency, I suppose what built up that quality and value of mine was really recognizing, accepting that I suffered quite heavily from dyslexia. And that really enabled me, one, to understand my challenges, but also challenge and push myself, which has built in and created this more resilient personality almost. And then the final one that sort of fed in there was treating people with respect. So this feeds back into what you were talking about, Karen, there with the culture by design that you spoke about, treating people with respect. That enables me to build this trust with people and really develop long-lasting and thriving relationships. And that can feed into personal life, but more importantly, into the health and safety aspect as well.
Awesome. A couple of words that came up. So the before career, before we became...
So before I entered into health and safety, I spent 7 years as a police officer in Police Scotland.
Oh, wow.
5 of those years were divisional response, and roughly about 2.5 years were in the roads policing. So part of that was investigating road fatalities and trying to reduce the leading causes of the fatalities as well. So a lot of campaign work, speed campaigns, vehicle campaigns, suitability for the road, and really looking at why these are occurring and trying to reduce the fatalities.
Wow, that's quite hard hitting.
That is,
Yeah.
it's a challenging environment. There's a lot of difficult parts to that role, and anyone that does that has got my highest regards and respect. But yeah, that sort of feeds into my passion of where I am now.
I bet you might have some interesting observations between industries as well.
Yeah, there is probably the biggest similarity between them is your opportunity to educate and influence people and influence driver behavior, influencing the environment around them. That feeds into influencing employees and influencing the work environment, and ultimately trying to make both as safe as possible.
That word influence is enormous, I think, in the work that we do, all of us in our different ways between the three of us, because I think that's what we're trying to do all the time. And when we're building a culture of safety or a safety culture, depends which way you look at it, and is there a difference? I think influencer, it doesn't matter who you are on that journey of trying to build that organizational safety culture, how we influence each other and those around us can make all the difference in the world. And I guess in some ways, influence can be, no, I'm not going to use the word positive. What's the word I'm looking for? It can be
Impactful?
Oh.
Oh.
Bingo.
Great minds thinking alike there. I like it. We're all in the right place.
Yeah, exactly.
Clearly.
Excellent.
So impactful in the right way is where I was going, because influence can happen in many different forms. And I think in the way that we're talking about it, it is definitely in the right direction. I always try to avoid the words positive and negative. I don't like them. So yes.
No. Yeah, it also brings to mind that whole thing around you can influence other people's paradigms. You can't change their paradigm or their way of thinking or being, but you can create a space or an environment which shows respect and where you are continuing to build that trust and inspire versus trying to push and force a way of being onto people, because then you just kind of get that immediate resistance rather than a buy-in and that could actually be interesting. Maybe I should try something different.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think you're speaking about the trust there, and we looked quite heavily at how we can build that, and I've educated myself from the course that Karen delivered, and there really is a lot of impactful things that you can do to build that trust. Just simple things like taking the time to spend with that person, listening, but not just being present and listening, but listening intently and responding as well. That ultimately we're gifted with 2 ears and 1 mouth, so we should listen twice as much as we talk. But that ultimately gives us the time to really absorb what they're saying and think appropriately about how we're going to answer. I suppose another part of that would be taking an interest in them as well. People are not just workers. People have got interests outside of work, things that they like. So I think taking the time to get to know that person, know their name, know their interests, know a bit more about them, that really builds that trust. And that all feeds into exactly what we're talking about, into that culture. Because if we can get the trust, we can all work together to develop the culture.
Isn't it amazing how just learning someone's name makes such a difference? As opposed to, oh, you over there. And I'm great with faces. Find names a bit more difficult, but I will find ways to kind of, when I'm on site, clock every single person and repeat their name 3 times, like when I meet them, so that it's solidified. And then if I do get it wrong, or I can't remember, be honest and say, I am so sorry, but I've met so many people today. Please, can you help me out and just give me your name again? Because it just shows a little bit of care. And actually, I am interested.
I'm reading a very interesting book at the moment. There's a line in it that sticks in my mind, and it says, "There is no sweeter sound to a person than the sound of their own name." And that really resonates what you've just said there. People love it when you can call them by their own name and address them of who they are.
It comes back to that word respect. If you care enough to try and remember a person's name, you're quite right. We're never going to remember everybody's name all the time. And what's worse is when you're standing next to a friend that you've known for 30 years and you can't remember their name. That's always embarrassing. But anyway, you go, and in those moments, you just go, and you're who exactly? Off. It's a bit embarrassing. But anyway, when you have those little mind moments that go away. You may not experience that yet, Callum, but anyway.
Yeah, no, we're starting to call them senior moments.
I try not to use that term, but yeah. So it reminds me of the early days when I used to run lots of experiential on-site workshops and that very subject about how do we help each other get through 2 or 3 days without name tags, although that can be very useful, and in multicultural environments. So it's not just names that we are able to pronounce, but how do we do it with names that we're not so able to pronounce, and the effort that we put into that. So we used to run this game, and we used to make everybody stand in a circle, and then with a ball, it would be randomly thrown around. And we're talking about 20 odd plus people, throw it around until everybody had repeated everybody's name at least once. And if we didn't, we'd go back to the beginning. So this thing would go around for quite some time. And then in the end, I would stand there and walk around the circle in front of every single person and say their name. I don't even think I could do that these days, to be honest, because it takes practice.
Yeah.
And that I'm out of practice. So, yeah, but it worked really well. And there was a huge amount of laughing that went with that, which helps. So respect, inspiration, and resilience, 3 fantastic words. If your friends and family had to describe you in one sentence, what would they say?
Yeah, well, I had to weed out the PC. I had to make sure it was politically correct and weed them out when I was getting responses about that. So I chose quite a sensible one. I chose hardworking and doesn't give up on his goals. Probably quite generic, but that one comes from my mum. She's saw when I decided to make that change in career, and at that moment, she said, "Well, what are you going to do?" Sort of struggled through school, never really had any going qualifications, got all my on-the-job training when I joined the police. So for me, there wasn't really much choice coming out. And when I said to my mum, I'm setting my goal, I want to be a health and safety advisor. And here we sit 18 months, 24 months later, I've done it. So not giving up on those goals, I totally accept that. Thank you very much.
I think there's something else really lovely in all of what you've said, and that is that you made a statement. You said your dyslexia, which was potentially part of that struggle, is actually what has enabled you.
Yeah. Absolutely. Acknowledge the biggest challenge I felt in that was acknowledging that I had dyslexia. And once I acknowledged it and I went through the assessment process and did a bit of research on it, understood, looked at what tools were available to assist me through that. And I suppose one of the most important things in it was having no shame in telling people I had dyslexia and asking for reasonable adjustments. Even when I went to school, dyslexia was not really acknowledged, and that was only 16, 17 years ago. So now as an adult, it's so important to let people know where you struggle and what you need assistance with. And really being able to do that has enabled me to push myself right to where I am now.
How has that enabled you in the current role?
I suppose in my current role, I suppose through the years, I've had to learn better communication skills verbally than written. My written skills have always been relatively poor with the dyslexia. So to balance that out, I've really developed the skill where I can communicate with anyone. I feel confident speaking to people. I'm quite comfortable having difficult conversations as well and being honest as well. So I think that has enabled me to really meet that aspect of my current role and help me as well.
Isn't it amazing how you can see a challenge as something that can either stop you from going forward, or like you said, really built in that personal value of resilience.
Mm-hmm.
And it's given you the opportunity to, I mean, what you've just said there is open up so many other skills and so many other ways of being. But through that, because it does take vulnerability to be able to say, you know what, this is where I need adjustments, why I need something done differently. But through being vulnerable, have you seen a different way that people have maybe opened up to you and seen that as being impactful and giving them a safe space to say, actually, you know what, this is where I'm struggling. So can you help me out here?
Very much so. And I suppose, and if I maybe use an example, so that I was really looking for some a technical expertise with a risk assessment, and this individual was, I wouldn't describe it as resistant, but not forthcoming with the written risk assessment. And when I said, "Oh," I just through conversation talk about risk assessments and said, "Oh, I've got dyslexia. It takes me quite a while to check them." This individual then opened up to me and said, "Well, actually, they had dyslexia as well. I think that was maybe the blocker that was stopping us moving forward with this risk assessment." So it was quite a nice opener. And from there, when we both acknowledged that there's potentially going to be spelling errors or grammatical errors, we can solve all them because there's all these great bits of technology out there now that will proofread it and put grammar in it for you. So there's no need to worry anymore.
So true.
Isn't it amazing?
Yeah, yeah. All
Love it.
those grammar police online must be very upset nowadays. Nothing for them to do.
I must admit, I use those tools a lot.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So do I.
Yeah.
I mean, they've been a game changer in
Yeah.
not having to think about the little details.
Mm-hmm.
I can think about the big picture and what is the message I want to share. And then Grammarly goes, and would you like to reword it like this? And I go, I love you.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely.
So true. So true. So, what makes safety close to your heart? And this is always an interesting question.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that we've used it in different times, at different places, in different countries, in different cultural settings. And it always brings up a really interesting initial reaction. And then sometimes I have asked people to draw it, which was a really interesting exercise one year with one group. And I've still got the pictures because they were so cool. I had a dragon. So they called themselves the dragons and they put a heart on the dragon. I can't quite remember why it was a dragon, but that's okay. But what is it that makes safety close to your heart?
Yeah, I mean, if I can sort of delve back slightly to when I was talking to you about being in the roads policing unit, I spoke about spending a lot of time investigating the fatal road traffic collisions, and a lot of that time I spent with families, and I saw the devastating impact that it had when you were delivering news, telling them that their son, daughter, father, mother, granny, grandpa, whoever it was, wasn't coming home anymore, and that they had sadly died in this accident. And I always thought at that point, when I was in that role, I would never want somebody to come and give me that news about my son. And I suppose when I decided to make that shift for a better work-life balance and to spend more time with my son, that going down that route to health and safety was an obvious choice for me, because I knew there that I could still do the same work, make the same impact, reduce fatalities in the workplace, do my best to ensure that no family has to go through that devastation or hear that news that I had been delivering to families previously before. So for me, that sits really closely, and knowing as well that if I can make an impact on people and organizations now and enable them to thrive, by the time my son gets a job somewhere, hopefully somebody will have fed into that organization as well, and ultimately it keep him safe.
Yeah, what a beautiful answer.
It's a hard hitting one. I don't
Yeah.
find it difficult to talk about, but
Yeah.
after seeing how, there's another way of putting it, how devastating that impact and that news is to a family.
Yeah.
You don't ever want to have that happening. So doing as much as possible to prevent that is at the heart of everything that I can bring. And that's why health and safety was such a good choice and why it's so close to my heart.
I wonder why it isn't close to everybody's heart.
That's a very good question, Garen. And I think that the reason that probably is because they haven't been indirectly or directly impacted by any adverse effects from it. If I think about COVID,
Mm.
when COVID was on the go, the lockdown was on, I didn't know a single person that had caught COVID. Not anyone. I didn't know
Wow.
anyone that had died from COVID. I honestly would go around thinking, what is the big deal? Now, if I translate that into safety, the exact same principle could be applied in anyone's mind that
Yeah.
I've never known anybody to get injured using this tool. They always do it this other way, so why do I need to do it any other way? Because nothing ever happens. And that's an expression that's used quite heavily across industries. Is it's always been done that way and nothing's ever happened. That's just because it hasn't happened yet. is the key. So I really do think it's because these people haven't been impacted by it directly or indirectly.
And I guess that leads a little bit to, what we do. What we all do actually in different ways is how do we help the conversations? How do we have thriving conversations around the concept of being safe, and not just for oneself, but for all of those around us? Now, everybody has different levels of risk tolerance. We know that, different experiences. I know Nula's had very personal experiences. I certainly have. And so they do make you think about certain things, not everything. And it's about sharing those. I think maybe it is about storytelling as much as anything. How do we influence people that maybe haven't had the same experience? And really, how do we influence them in a way so that they don't have to have the experience? That's always the tricky bit, I think. Thoughts?
I think that is, I'm sure Nuala will agree with me. It's keeping that open lines of communication.
Yeah.
One of the main things in my role is sourcing examples of these incidents occurring elsewhere. So just because we don't necessarily hear about them in the UK, or we don't hear about them in Scotland, or we don't hear about them in Aberdeen, really start narrowing it down. If I go on to all these other safety organisations, find examples, share that with people, share that with employees, share that with people carrying out these hazardous tasks, that look, this has happened in the same circumstances that you're potentially going to carry out that task. So we need to look at an alternative way of doing it, or we need to follow the process that's safe in doing it. And I think keeping the open line of communication, and again, there's not always saying that the process is the right way of doing it. I think listening to them in a line of communication and hearing if they know of a better way of doing the task, or they're the technical experts that are carrying out the task, do they know of a new technology that can make it safer, quicker? So we really need to have a two-way street of communication.
I think that just falls into that line of psychological safety in many ways, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Nola, you said earlier, bringing in the word vulnerability is, and maybe that's where a lot of this lies, is how do we help people to understand that it's okay to be vulnerable? And vulnerability doesn't mean that we're falling apart. It means, well, I actually want to challenge the system. I want to be able to talk about an idea that I have, but I'm not that person. I'm not in a leadership role, so nobody's going to listen to me. So how do we, within our organizational cultures, make it okay for people to challenge the status quo or contribute in a way that they might not normally? Because, of course, the more we open up those channels, the more vulnerable we become as individuals. And it doesn't matter whether we're a leader, a frontline worker, a boots on the ground person, or the senior VP. I mean, it happens to everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I think we have lots of work ahead of us still.
We certainly do.
for a long time to come. Whilst
Wow.
we're all human beings, I suspect. Yeah.
And one of the things we often talk about is how do we help people ask better questions?
Yeah.
And what you were saying there is often the people with the boots on the ground, they know what can hurt them.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe they don't have that sense of safety that they can speak up or they can put in an observation card or what have you. So some of the questions that work really well are things like, you're about to do this task, you've done it plenty of times. If we had a new person come to site, what are you concerned about that could hurt them when they do this task for the first time? And then it opens up that conversation of, well, I would tell them to look out for this, I would tell them to look out for that. And then it's like, okay, well, what can we change so that you don't even have to be worrying about?
Great question.
And the other one that I love is very similar to, you've mentioned your son a few times, is if your son was starting working here today, what would you be telling him to look out for? Fabulous. Now let's go and fix those.
And I think really taking it on that personal level, that's what really sends these things home. Yeah, I think that's a great way of putting it.
It actually reminds me of a story that Andrew shared, who Callum also knows from the program. And I remember he was telling me he was having a conversation. He was having there was one of those persons on a particular course, not ours, but another one, that was just being the classic sitting back in the chair, arms folded, going, yeah, whatever. Why am I here? This is boring. I'm going to be the antagonist in the room. And of course, they went outside to have a break. So Andrew thought, Andrew being Andrew, I need to go and have a conversation with this person. So he went and sat down with him and talked about whatever, the weather, all sorts of things. And the interesting thing with this particular person was his son worked there as well. Now, I might get two stories mixed up here, but what was interesting is, yes, it was. So his son did work there. And then Andrew sort of said, so when will your daughter be starting? And he said, what do you mean? Why my daughter? He said, yes, well, it's in the family. Your son works here, you work here. When will your daughter be starting to work here? And he goes, oh, no, she's not going to work here. And Andrew says, well, why not? Well, it's too dangerous. Just like that. Changed the rest of the program for that person, more importantly, because I started to look at it from a different perspective and went, that's interesting. Tell me more about that. Yeah. So you're right. It's how do you get to that, to the heart, I suppose, isn't it? And sometimes it has to be cognitive. Not everybody wants to share their heart, but they'll think about the logical side of things, so why is that important to them? Not always easy to find, I guess. You got to kind of chip away at it, don't you?
I was just going to say there that I suppose that's feeds back into taking the time to get to know everyone, and then that gives you an idea of what they're responsive to.
You answered the question I was going to ask you.
Brilliant.
We are so in tune, it's unbelievable.
Oh, I love it.
So, what do you know now that you wish you would have known at the start of your career? Well, the second career. Or both, actually.
Or both, yeah. Probably applicable across both. And you have really given me a lot to think about since we met, is the importance of building trust. I recently changed workplaces, so it was to go in there and quickly and establish that trust, start meeting everyone. So my first week of being there, mostly revolved around meeting people, learning their names, learning a bit about them, learning about what they do, asking them questions. So really already starting to build that trust with everyone before I even start looking at the safety within the premises and looking at the culture as well.
You made my heart so happy.
Yes. Yeah.
I love to hear that. I'm glad what I'm saying can have that impact as well. And you put that word in my mind. I can't get out impact. That's just gonna be everything.
Brilliant.
But I suppose the other side of that coin of me building trust with people is also that they can build trust in me. I want them to feel that I'm approachable and that they can approach me and voice any concerns without fear of ridicule or without thinking that it will go anywhere else. Knowing that I can help and give a solution or part of a solution is really what I want. And, we've spoken about it already as well, importance of listening. That what I said to you before about 2 ears, 1 mouth. My mum used to say that all the time. When you go to school, you've got 2 ears for listening to that teacher and 1 mouth, so you speak less. You should be listening more. And that always stuck in my mind. So And just obviously expanded on that, and we discussed it again earlier, was there's two ways to listen. There's listening and being present in that room, but there's listening and listening intently. And I feel, even looking and discussing with you two here, that when I speak to you, you're listening to me intently from the reactions I'm receiving back. So it's important to feed that back to people when they speak to you and acknowledge what they're saying. And yeah, taking a genuine interest in people. We spoke about it, learning their names, and really all these ideas, they fed out of what we discussed, Karen, going further and looking into it. And these are all things that I wish I had known years ago, because I think they had a bigger impact that I could have made even 7 years ago if I had known these.
Wow. That's an enormous compliment. I think that's such an important lesson for anybody who's moving into a leadership role, or might already be well and truly entrenched in one, but might be feeling a bit jaded. By just making that shift, by putting it out to the person in front of you, or to the environment in front of you, instead of keeping it in or thinking, right, this is all about me. When we talk to newer leaders, it's really, the job is about you, but it's about understanding where you fit into something. You know, when we work on oil rigs, first month that we're out there, all we're doing is building rapport. Because until you have rapport, you don't have a conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And especially when you've been introduced as a safety auditor, not a safety coach. And honestly, I would go out on deck.
Yeah.
And they would scatter. It would be seagull on deck, literally, would spread like wildfire. And it took me a month before the guys would actually not just run and hide and put over the radio that I was the auditors out there. But it wasn't quite a month. It was a bit less than that, but it was a lot of work.
Yeah.
And it is.
Especially when you go in and people are defensive because they think that you're going to come and tell them what they're doing wrong.
Mm-hmm. But,
whereas actually what you're coming into is go and say, what are you doing right? And what do you think needs to be done differently?
Mm-hmm. Isn't it interesting there how I would imagine potentially somebody from leadership has wrongly introduced you, just the difference in those words, how the impact that's had when you've been there?
It's just made me laugh. I landed on a rig, got out of the helicopter door, and the guy looked at me and said, "Oh, you're a girl." I'm like, you're very clever. Right. So that was really the beginning of that journey.
Wow.
Right. And I was there for a month. His whole thing was, and it was the rig site safety guy. He went, "Oh, you're a girl." Oh, shit, I've got to change all the sleeping arrangements.
That would be helpful for them to know in advance.
I mean, really, I'm okay, you know, fine. No, you know. Oh, my goodness me. So, that lack of communication across from here to there causes what we like to call conversational waste. Right. So many of these things can be avoided if there's a little bit better communication and people have an understanding of the different types of conversations that we might need to have with people or to get things done.
I just want to go back to something that Callum said earlier, and it was about your first week in your new role. Because if people going into a new position can just grasp that don't worry about technical, don't worry about what's happening, what procedures in place, don't worry about going into the detail, but just go and meet people where they're at. Mm-hmm. And I am dying to see in a really good way how that is going to play out for you over the next few months and years.
Well, even just to give a short sight of it, so I spent week 3, I think it is, potentially. First week meeting everyone, second week sort of settling in, finding the feet, finding what's been done, sending out some communications, and you'll be well aware that this week is Mental Health Awareness Week. Mm-hmm. Sent out some campaigns, and somebody that works in the other office actually came through and said to me, "It's so nice that you've come here, hit the ground running, spent time to speak to everyone, and are putting out positive campaigns already." And I actually thought to myself, no one has ever thanked me for sending out campaigns. And it actually made me feel great. And I think
Awesome.
she knew, because I couldn't wipe the smile off my
I'll
face
bet.
either. I was ear to ear. But, and I just thought if I had never gone through and introduced and spent the time, well then, and there's other things that fed into that through lines of communication. We're looking at implementing some new areas. So I put out a consultation. This is what we want. What does everyone think? Does it work for you? Has anyone got any suggestions? And I genuinely think with all that open lines of communication of me putting out, I have received back, and it has been positive, and it's great. And I think that just being able to keep doing that, that'll just bring the culture right up. It's great. Honestly, it's fantastic. I felt great.
I have to say to
As you
everybody
should.
listening, absolutely, and to anyone listening to this, you can hear and feel his smile.
Absolutely. It's wonderful.
My mum will kill me for this. She always says to me, I can hear you smiling down the phone.
Perfect.
She'll probably listen to this and I can hear him smiling right now.
Love it. Go, Mom.
Yeah.
All right. So shall we have one last quick question?
Mhm.
If you were granted one miracle that would change safety culture in our industries, what would that miracle be?
There's a lot of things I would like to wish for, but you only give me one.
Yeah.
I couldn't even have a lamp and have 3 wishes and a genie, but I've got one miracle is all I'm allowed. But I guess for me,
Yeah.
I would really want a proactive and holistic safety mindset from everyone at all levels of the organization. For me, that just means that every individual from the top to the bottom would prioritize the safety in every decision that they're making and in every action that they carried out. And really, for me, that is the one miracle I could ask for. I don't think I can make it I don't think I can go any further than that. I think that's one great miracle that I'd love.
What a miracle that would be.
Mhm.
Interestingly, what came to mind is I wonder if the word safety would even be used.
It would just be normal.
It would just be normal.
Oh, you've given me a lot to think about now.
Deep. That was deep.
Oh man, I feel I could feel a campaign coming. That's it.
Oh, there you go. I love it.
I mean, a campaign. Safety is the new normality. There we go.
There we go.
Oh my goodness.
Excellent.
So how do we spell
You'll have to
safety?
put a splash of pink in there.
Indeed.
A splash.
Just put a pink. Yeah. So any last second thoughts as we close off?
No, I just want to say thank you to both of you, and for inviting me on. Thank you for this podcast. Anyone that's listening, there's a lot you can take from this. Go and do some further reading. Take the points that are spoken about in here, use them, learn them, develop them, and they will help you in your safety career.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Any final thoughts, Nuala?
It has been a fabulous and very inspiring conversation. And
It has.
I'm going to walk away with, the reminder of trust, listen, and show genuine interest.
Yeah.
And if you can just do those 3 things, and they're not easy, they take effort, but they are so worth it at the end of the day. So thank you so much for sharing those with us and the impact that it's had on you is in the short time that you've really embraced them and gone, this is going to make a difference in my career.
Amazing.
Wonderful.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. It's been a joy. My day didn't start out so great, but I find I'm smiling. So thanks.
Great. We're all smiling.
Thank you for joining us today. It is always lovely to have conversations that matter. To learn more about creating a culture of safety and care, please visit our website, safetycollaborations.com, to access our show notes, resources, and guides. Leave us a message via the Message Us section on the show notes page, and we'll get back to you.
You can also join our community on social media by following us on our LinkedIn pages, Safety Collaborations, Karen Avari, and Nuala Gage, and on our new Safety Collaborations social channels, YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram. Our handle Safety Collaborations is much the same. Sharing is caring. Follow us on your favourite podcast platform Leave us a 5-star review would be awesome. Doing these things helps us to grow and share our collective conversations. Till next time,
Stay safe.
and stay well.